It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Rico Brogna. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy Turkey Day. Happy holidays. Happy spending time with your family day. Welcome into episode number 592 of the Rico. We got a lot to talk about. We react to Dylan Cease's monster contract with the Toronto Blue Jays, the Red Sox trading for Sonny Gray. So two starting pitchers are off the market. We all know the Mets could use starting pitchers. So we'll get into the impact on those two moves on the Mets. Also, the Mets making a bunch of minor league signings. We will discuss it. We'll read some of your emails, more fallout from the Brandon Nimmo trade. So a lot to talk about here on Rico Brogna. I will tell you, when Dylan Cease signed with the Toronto Blue Jays a mega contract, a 7-year, $210 million deal. We found out about it right at the end of Evan and Tiki on Wednesday. My first thought may surprise you, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe you know me so well, you'll say, oh, I knew that was Evan's first thought. My first thought was, this is why the Mets were never wise to trade for Dylan Cease a year ago. Dylan Cease was a name we talked a lot about, and I like him. I mean, he is the definition of reliable, and the Mets certainly needed that in their rotation last year, and they missed that. A guy who could take the baseball 32 times. I know his numbers weren't great last year. I think if you look closely at it, you'll see he pitched to a lot of bad luck, but nevertheless, if you had traded for Dylan Cease, that bad luck comes with it, right? If you're acquiring him, knowing he's a free agent at the end of the season, you got to deal with the risks of it. Maybe a bad luck year like he had in his final year with San Diego. But a big part of why I would always push back on trading for Cease, despite liking the player, was this contract. Was the fact that we know this team president, David Stearns, at least so far, maybe he'll prove us wrong, has an aversion to giving long-term deals to starting pitchers unless their name is Yoshinobu Yamamoto. And so I hesitated to trade for Dylan Cease in what appeared to be an absolute rental situation. And this contract proves it would have been a rental situation, because there's no way David Stearns was ever going to give Dylan Cease a 7-year contract. And I don't even blame him. Honestly, I like the player. I've always liked the player. But what scared me when we talked about this last year, throughout the winter and then early in spring training, when the rumors started to percolate that the Padres would potentially trade him, was that he was such a guaranteed rental. Because even though he's relatively young for a starting pitcher getting to free agency, you're going to give a 7-year deal, which it turned out to be, to a guy who's in his 30s, even though he's about to turn 30. He's actually still 29 years old. But think about it. You give a 7-year deal, you got that guy signed till he's 36. So when I saw the contract, my first reaction wasn't, wow, the Mets dodged a bullet by not giving it to him, or the Mets should have given it to him, which I'm sure some people feel. My first reaction was thinking about the trade, was thinking about all that discussion that we had about trading for him. And inevitably, this is why I never wanted to, because they were never going to give him that contract. Now, would I have given him that contract? No. I think Dylan Cease is a really good pitcher. Really good pitcher. I think he is the definition of reliability. Could that eventually expire as he gets into his 30s? Will there finally be a year in which he suffers an injury and doesn't make 30 starts? It's probable. I mean, it's likely in a way, knowing the way pitchers are. But that's not even my ultimate fear. My ultimate fear about Dylan Cease is that, do I want to pay $30 million a year for 7 years to a guy who I think is really solid and really reliable, but is not an ace? And, you know, if you look at his numbers overall throughout his career, I would say he's probably a number 2 more than anything. Let me pull up his baseball savant and baseball reference page, go through some of the numbers real quick. So last year, obviously the overall numbers weren't great, a 4.5 ERA, but he did pitch to some bad luck. The year before that, a 3.5 ERA. A year before that, a 4.5 ERA. And then 2022 was his dominant season, his Cy Young caliber season, when he finished second in the voting and had a 2.2 ERA and could have won that award in most other years. that season feels like an outlier. So despite the fact he strikes a lot of guys out, led the league in strikeouts per 9 last year, gets a ton of swing and misses. Despite that, like the last 3 years show you that he's probably not going to give you that 2.2 ERA. Hasn't done it in 3 years. And even that year, if we're going to be fair, if in one breath we're going to say he pitched to some bad luck this past season that led to a 4.5 ERA, if you look at his numbers from 2022, when he did pitch to that 2.2 ERA, he also pitched to some really good luck. He had a lower whip in 2024 than he did in 2022. He struck out more guys per 9 innings this past season, than 2022. So the moral of the story is he's a good pitcher. I'm not besmirching him. It's that $30 million a year, 7-year deal. Now, the pushback you can give me, and the pushback I would give David Stearns, would be, okay, Dylan Cease isn't the guy. Maybe we all agree with that. Clearly, that's my opinion. At some point in free agency, if you want to add a good pitcher, you're going to have to get uncomfortable. And by the way, that's the reality. And so the question for David Stearns and the question for us as Met fans and guys just trying to be honest about how we feel about these players is, who is the player you're willing to get uncomfortable about? Obviously, all roads lead back to Tarek Skubal because he's the best pitcher in baseball. And I have a level of getting uncomfortable with the guys I have to give up, and then certainly getting uncomfortable in giving him, $500 million. And $500 million may sound absurd, but Dylan Cease just got 210. And as good as he is, he's not Tarek Skubal. So here's the homework assignment we all have. And we'll use free agent pitchers, the free agent pitchers that are out there. And you can refer back a few episodes ago to the Rico where we did a deep dive on the starters. Of all the starters that are out there, and Dylan Cease has now been crossed off the list, who is the guy you'd be most willing to get uncomfortable with? That kind of sounds weird, but you know what I mean. Giving an uncomfortable contract to. Because take a look at Max Fried a year ago. Max Fried signed an 8-year deal. And I think the natural reaction that most of us had was, wow, 8 years for Max Fried? I mean, that seems risky, especially with a guy who, while it hasn't been a major injury history, has had an injury history, missing a handful of starts due to a blister or a hamstring. But the Yankees, the team that got Max Fried, needed to do that to get him. They needed to get uncomfortable. Is there somebody in this free agency that you would kind of do that with? And unfortunately, the answer is probably not. But the Mets need pitching. And so if we assume they're going to address it, and free agency is the way you think they're going to do it, who are you going to do it for? I have no regret about the Mets not signing Dylan Cease to a 7-year, $210 million deal. But I'll tell you where I do have a little bit of regret. Just a little bit, just a slight amount. And that is the trade that was pulled off the other day by the Boston Red Sox. They acquired Sonny Gray. Sonny Gray, we never really got a chance to talk about. In fact, in a couple of days, we're going to do our deep dive into trade targets. And I wrote a few things down about Sonny Gray and why I would go after him. And a part of why I was interested in Sonny Gray is that I'm not committing long-term. He's a 36-year-old pitcher who's basically going into a contract year, basically because there's a team option in 2027 that I'm probably not picking up. But the concern about Sonny Gray was the money. The money was obscene. And when you throw in the fact that the Mets are going to be a taxed team, in all likelihood, Sonny Gray would be potentially owed $40 million, and that's before taxes, to pitch for the Mets in 2026. But I figured, and this is where I would tell you my interest level and where I have a little bit of regret that the Mets didn't get him, I figured the Cardinals would pay for part of it. I figured that the Cardinals, who are clearly moving into this rebuild mode, would want to rid themselves of Sonny Gray, really the contract, and, try to get a young piece or two. And so they would pay a part of the deal. The Boston Red Sox acquired Sonny Gray. And the St. Louis Cardinals agreed to basically pay half of that salary, which feels like such an enormous amount of money. In return, the St. Louis Cardinals got a single-A pitcher by the name of Brandon Clark, who was a fifth-round pick in the 2024 draft. Doesn't feel like a huge prospect. Isn't a huge prospect. So you see a low-level pitcher go back, and then you see Richard Fitz go back, who is a 25-year-old right-hander who we saw briefly pitch last year for Boston, making a handful of starts. Not a huge return. So part of why I would have been interested in Sonny Gray is I don't feel like I'm giving much up. I'm getting him on a short-term deal. And before anyone says, but Evan, he can't handle New York, I reject it. I don't believe that. I believe that Sonny Gray's issues when he pitched in New York had more to do with the team he was on, forcing him or advising him to use a pitch menu. I like that term, menu. Like you have a menu of pitches, and they were telling him to throw this more than that. And once he left that team, the New York Yankees, and he went to Cincinnati, and his ERA went from 4.90 to 2.87. I don't think it was he couldn't handle the market. I think it was that it didn't work what the Yankees were trying to do with him. You think New York was a problem. He was a 28-year-old back then. The Yankees were the first team he was traded to after spending those years in Oakland. And since then, he's been in Cincinnati and Minnesota and St. Louis. Not huge markets, but he's bounced around and he's a veteran. So the two parts that made the Gray deal, not that I'm mad, not that I'm angry, but I look at that deal and I say, ooh, I wouldn't have minded doing that, was the fact that the Cardinals covered a big portion of the $40 million that's owed to him. I mean, essentially, the Red Sox are going to pay Sonny Gray about $20 million to pitch for them next year. I think that is decent value. I mean, if we're just being honest, like Sean Manaea is making $25 million. And I think the going rate for good pitching is usually high. Real quick, when you look at Sonny Gray's last couple of years, he made 32 starts last year for St. Louis, 4.28 ERA, a FIP of 3.39, which shows you probably pitched to some bad luck. He didn't walk anybody. I mean, he threw the lowest walks per nine of his career. So overall, and he threw 180 innings. I mean, sign me up for that. Year before that, 28 starts, 3.80 ERA. Year before that, 32 starts, 184 innings, a 2.79 ERA. If you look at Sonny Gray since leaving the New York Yankees, he goes out there, he takes the baseball just about every start. Not as reliable as Dylan Cease. You see some 26, 24 start seasons, which is almost a full season. Not quite. Dylan Cease is hitting 32, but basically a full season. And so the combination of the Red Sox really didn't give up much, and they're not having to pay him anything crazy, I would look at Gray to the Red Sox with a little bit more of a jealous eye than Dylan Cease to Toronto. But I think what we all need to figure out, too, is assuming guys aren't taken off the roster, and they can be, especially in trades, when you look at what the Mets have pitching-wise right now, and obviously some of that may change. I mean, we hear Kodai Senga's name so often in terms of being moved away. The Mets have a lot of pitching. In fact, you could argue they actually have pitching depth. That's not really an issue. Christian Scott, we should not forget about. Brandon Sproat, Jonah Tong, some of the younger guys that likely don't start the year in the rotation. So it's not that they need depth. It's that they need more quality and more reliability. Would Sonny Gray kind of fit that? I don't think he's an ace. Not suggesting he is. But is that a solid, reliable two that this rotation could use? Yeah, that's my answer. Like in an ideal world, and again, I'm going to play this ideal world assuming that some of the pitchers currently on the Mets roster are going to be moved away. I don't love trading Kodai Senga, but I get it. Kodai Senga is the opposite of reliability. And so if we're talking about adding reliability to the rotation, if you subtracted a guy like Senga and added a guy like Gray, I'm not saying they're traded for each other, obviously, but you trade Kodai somewhere else for young players, and then you trade a piece or two for Sonny Gray, is the Met rotation better? What I would say is the Met rotation is more reliable. Does Kodai Senga have a higher upside than Sonny Gray? Yeah. I think at this point in their careers, they do, is the way I would phrase that, because Senga's younger. Obviously, Sonny's accomplished a lot as a major leaguer. But in terms of right now, who would have a higher upside, it's Kodai Senga. But what Gray would provide is that reliability. So I guess the way I would define this is I'm not angry because there are still so many pieces that are out there. But whenever a move is made, I think the fairest way to look at it is whether it's a free agent, you look at the contract and you say, would I have offered that? Would I have been comfortable? Would I have been happy if the Mets signed that player for that contract? And when Dylan Cease's contract comes out, I say, no, I'm good. They made the right decision. And when a guy gets traded, same thing. I put myself in the shoes. I try to think of, okay, what's a comparable deal in terms of the assets that was given up? In this case, the money that was picked up by St. Louis. And I say, would I have made a deal like that? And in this case, the answer would be yes. Now, I know there are going to be a lot of people that disagree because of the New York thing. There's no way for me to prove I'm right about that. Obviously, I guess you would have to come back to New York and pitch well or suck, and someone would be proven wrong. But I have felt that way for a long time about him. I never thought the New York criticism was fair.
I agree with you, by the way, Ev. Like, I think Sonny Gray was unfortunately a product of whatever he was forced to his the menu, as you said, in New York. Now, but the one question I really do have, and this is maybe more would bother me about this whole situation, especially with David Stearns, is were the Mets even in? Was there even a conversation about Sonny Gray and the Mets? Like, how desperate, and I know that David Stearns doesn't want to sound desperate, but we all know how desperate the Mets are for starting pitching, and Sonny Gray would be an upgrade for sure. Was there a phone call? Did they know about it? Did David Stearns know about it?
Yeah, I'm not worried about that. I think the Mets are connected to every starting pitcher that's available. Even Dylan Cease, who's a Scott Boras guy, I'm sure they touched base. And once they saw, wow, this is going to be a 7-year contract, they obviously probably bowed out. But no, I'm not worried about that. I think David Stearns is going to do his job looking around. It's a matter of what he's going to strike on or not.
I mean, you're telling me, though, that, and I'm not trying to get all upset about this at all, because, again, like, regardless, there's plenty on the market still, but you had St. Louis eat part of this contract.
Mm-hmm.
You're telling me that this was not a David Stearns layup right here? You couldn't have made this happen?
I mean, it didn't happen. I think that most general managers and team presidents are in on everything, and then you obviously make the decision you want to make. I agree with you that this is one of those moves I look at with a jealous eye, but they decided not to pounce. But before you get mad about it, just the same reason I'm not mad about it yet, is there's still so many starters on the market.
Right.
And so I think what's challenging about an offseason, kind of like the Semien Nimmo trade, is we want to react to what happens in the moment, and we do, but you also balance it with this is like a painting that's being drawn, and we haven't seen the whole painting yet. So, yes, I like that deal that the Red Sox made for Gray. I like the fact that St. Louis picked up the money. I'm not scared about what was given up. Brandon Clark and Richard Fitz. The equivalent of the Mets would not cause us pain, at least in the moment. But let's see where else it goes. By the way, I got to tell you something very interesting.
Yes.
If you go back to the Rico Brogna where we did the free agent starting pitching deep dive, what I would do when we talked about a lot of these pitchers is I told you the MLB trade rumors projected contracts. And so, for example, when we got to Framber Valdez, it was 5 years, 150. I'd like to read to you the projected contract for Dylan Cease. And if you go back to the archives of the Rico, when I said it, I think you and I were both like, wow, that's crazy. You want to hear the projected deal for Dylan Cease?
Yeah, please give it to me.
So, again, he just signed for 7 years, 210, right? The projected deal was 7 years, 189.
He got more.
So they got the years right. Well, let's start with that because there's no other pitcher projected to get that kind of length of a contract. There's 5-year deals. There is no 7-year deal. And Dylan Cease got projected 7 years, 189. He ended up with 7 years, 210, which, by the way, that's a $21 million difference over the course of 7 years. It's about $3 million. In fact, actually, it is $3 million.
Good.
So it's not
Nice
that
math.
much. So the money was not far off, but they certainly kind of sold it. They under projected it.
But they nailed the years, though, which is amazing because in this market, I mean, unless you're Tariq Skubal, no one really thinks 7-year deal.
Well, I think what helps Cease is that he's about to turn 30. So this season coming up is his age 30 season, which you can't say about a lot of the other guys. Zach Gallen is 30, but he's going to be 31 in August. His projected contract is 4 years, so it's not even close.
So, I have a question. All right. So, and I'm sorry to go down this rabbit hole. So, just give me like 30 seconds to go with it. Here is a going to be 30-year-old starting pitcher. Didn't have a great year. Had an okay year. He does pitch every time he starts every game he's supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He does strike out a lot of guys. He signed a 7-year long-term deal. Last year, Pete Alonso, a guy who plays every game, didn't have a great season, but still hit 30-plus home runs, can't give him a long-term contract. I mean, we're talking about even money here. What we're talking about with Pete Alonso is what Dylan Cease basically just got. Why do you if you think that Pete Alonso an overpay, then what do you consider Dylan Cease?
I mean, it's completely different. I'm not defending it because I didn't want to give Dylan Cease a 7-year contract, so I don't want to sit here and defend it. But, I mean, you're talking about a 30-year-old pitcher and a 31-year-old first baseman. It's just very, very different.
But last year he was gonna go. He was 29, gonna be 30.
Just keep this in mind about Alonso. Until proven otherwise, and maybe it will be proven otherwise in a week, a month, a year. Well, not a year, but a month or 2 months. No one else has been willing to give Pete Alonso a long-term contract.
But
no one. So,
and that's my question, though.
Yeah.
That's my question.
Yeah, I think it's just because he's a right-hand hitting first baseman who doesn't have a great glove. And basically that doesn't have a lot of value to a lot of general managers around baseball. Fair or not, just the way it is.
I don't get it.
Speaking of starting pitching, Ryan Helsley did an interview with The Athletic the other day. I found it very interesting. And to Helsley's credit, he feels like he's identified what went wrong last year, which we all kind of assumed what it was, which is that he's tipping his pitches. And Helsley says, yeah, I see it. So great. I'm glad you figured it out now. But there is one team, the Detroit Tigers have been identified as the team, who view Ryan Helsley as a starting pitcher and would consider converting him to a starting pitcher. So you are seeing a trend now in baseball. It's been going on for a few years. The Mets weren't the first with Clay Holmes, but this is common now where we get to free agency. It's like, okay, which reliever should we think about converting into a starting pitcher? What I wonder about with a guy like Helsley, who has such a high octane fastball, is can he maintain that over 70, 75 pitches, 80, 85 pitches? I'm going to give you this prediction. I do not think Helsley will sign to convert to a starter. I think he's going to have more value as a relief pitcher. I don't know where he ends up. I don't really care at the end of the day. I just thought the Tigers amongst teams considering him as a starting pitcher, I found it fascinating. The other thing was Marcus Semien had his press conference. I listened to the whole thing. I don't really believe there's anything worth cutting or playing here on the Rico. I know we listen to everything David Stearns had to say. I think with players, it's a little bit different. I know we played a few clips of Brandon Nimmo, but not a lot. But my takeaway from Marcus Semien, if you want to check it out, do it on your own. Go to the SNY YouTube page. It's there. He comes across like a leader. So we hear he's a leader. He was asked about being a leader, and he described his leadership skills. But the moment he started talking, he did little tiny things that are big things that you take notice of. Number one, every reporter would ask the question, and Marcus would begin his response by acknowledging the person's name and thanking them for the question, which is very classy. I mean, if anything, Marcus Semien's a classy guy. I don't think there's any question. But you listen to him and you feel like, okay, that is a guy that can have a positive influence in the locker room. You hear how hard of a worker he is. He even admitted that he found out about the trade while he was working out. When asked about his down numbers, you don't want to make excuses. The home road splits are odd. There's no doubt about it. I don't know what to make of it because Semien's played there for a few years. And if you go back to 2023, where he did have a very good year, and obviously Texas won the World Series, there were no home road splits that were odd. So why that happened last year, I can't explain it. Sometimes it's bad luck. I mean, sometimes it's as simple as that. Do I have confidence he's going to have a bounce back year? I guess I have a level of confidence that he'll have a bounce back year. I don't know to what level. I don't know if we'll ever see the guy that's getting MVP votes. I love that he feels that way. But I think listening to him speak, you certainly feel good about how serious he takes this, how hard he works, how the defense will be there. I don't think there's any question. What they get from him offensively, it's anybody's guess. I'll give you this 3-year guess on Marcus Semien because he obviously has 3 years left on his deal. I think the best of his offensive seasons will come next year. Like, I would predict he'll be up in every category offensively. So, like, he had 230 last year. He'll hit higher than that. He had a 670 OPS last year, one of the lowest of his careers. He'll do better than that. 15 home runs. He'll do better than that. So I think he'll have a better year this upcoming year. I don't think that will continue over the life of the contract. Like, if I had to guess long term, I think 2026 is his best year as a Met, and it's productive, and it goes up on every category. And then it probably goes down in 27 and 28. I'm using logic just based on his age. But hey, fingers crossed. And we talked about it on the last Rico. It was an emailer who brought up George Springer as a guy who had a renaissance year at 35. So we can only hope for the same with Marcus Semien, but the defense will be fun to watch. I mean, the Mets have themselves a chance to have a much improved defensive infield when you look at Semien at second, hoping Lindor kind of bounces back defensively at shortstop. And at least as of now, Brett Beatty at third base, where he became a really good defensive third baseman. So at least on paper, this infield does have a chance to be a lot better defensively.
Again, I'm going to say something that's kind of stupid, but this is basically the Jose Iglesias, get right situation, because everyone wanted Jose Iglesias back last year. And realistically, Jose Iglesias had an amazing 2024 with the New York Mets. And, those numbers, he never really put up as good of numbers offensively, had big hits. But defensively, that's like a Marcus Semien. That's what you're going to get. Iglesias is actually a little bit older, if I'm correct, by like a few months. But regardless, and it's a complete overpay for Semien. But the upside is Marcus Semien has had amazing offensive seasons.
He's got a much higher upside offensively than Jose Iglesias.
Well, right, but everyone talked about last year, oh, you got rid of Jose Iglesias, you got rid of a leader, like you just said. Semien is potential leader right now of this team, or could be, because it's just the way he spoke. But like, everyone complained that said that's the reason for the downfall, the leadership, and Iglesias in the middle of the infield, just kind of being that regular second baseman that keeps everything up the middle, straight type of thing. Semien's going to do that with potential of some power and some upside offensively.
The Mets also added 4 guys on minor league deals. Nick Burdi, the right-hander who's bounced around baseball, was with the Yankees a few years ago, the Red Sox. Anderson Severino, Robert Stock, and Jose Ramos. Jose Ramos is the one that I'm most intrigued by, because the other 3 guys are veteran relievers. They have a chance to join the Syracuse shuttle. Like, there's a chance we see them up, down, up, down, up, down. Jose Ramos I looked into because I was like, who's this guy? 24 years old. He's going to turn 25 on New Year's Day, so very young. He's a right-hand hitting outfielder from Panama and has been in the LA Dodgers organization since 2019. They signed him as an 18-year-old. Last year, he bounced between AA and AAA. Did not perform well at AA, but in AAA, In 44 games, hit .295 with a .916 OPS, 8 home runs, 27 RBIs. As far as where he plays all over the outfield. So like last year at in the minor league levels, he played 24 games in center, 48 games in right. So it looks like he plays all over the outfield. But I guess what I'm most intrigued by is that he's 25, or he's going to be 25. So most of the guys you sign to these minor league deals are, the Anderson Severinos of the world, the Robert Stocks, the Nick Birdies, the relief pitchers that they show up in spring training, and maybe they stick around, maybe they don't. Maybe they get DFA'd. Maybe you never see them again. But signing a young outfielder, the Mets could use outfielders, in Jose Ramos, keep an eye on it. Maybe the Mets turn him into a prospect, because he is only 24 years old. You never know. The other thing was the non-tender deadline was last week. The Mets didn't really do anything too surprising. David Peterson was tendered a deal, for anyone who was worried. Francisco Alvarez tendered a deal. Tyrone Taylor tendered a deal. As far as who was non-tendered, who entered the free agent market, I wrote down a few names that jump out at me that are worth at least discussing. This is not an endorsement of signing them. It's at least a discussion. I'm getting my charger out because my tablet is about to die. So if you are watching on YouTube, that's what I'm doing. I'm a multitasker. Let me plug this bad boy in. There we go.
Very exciting, by the way. Good
Thank
reach. You. Good reach on the plugging, recharging of the tablet.
Thank you. It's very impressive, right?
Yeah.
Actually, you know what? I screwed up. I don't even have. I actually, it's hilarious. I don't have the charger. I have the wire that usually connects to the charger. So I didn't do that good of a job, but I give you some names. If my tablet dies, it dies. If it dies, it dies. If he dies, he dies. You know what that's from, Huff?
Die Hard.
Oh,
Godfather.
I have no idea. I'm asking you. I don't know.
Oh, I forget.
No, I think it's from Rocky. Isn't it from Rocky?
Oh, yeah, Dolph Lundgren. Duh.
Yeah, dies, it dies. All right. Couple of guys. And notice a lot of them are going to be outfielders because God knows the Mets could use an outfielder. That's basically, that's where I'm at. J.J. Bleday. Remember J.J. Bleday used to be a prospect back in the day with the Marlins? He was with the A's. He actually got DFA'd before this, and then he got non-tendered, which is essentially the same thing. Outfielder, it just jumped out at me. There's really nothing. I'm not endorsing signing him. Maybe you bring him in as another outfielder to compete in camp.
How old is he these days? 29?
Yeah, he's not like young, super young anymore, but he's still relatively young. He's 28 years old, so he's actually a little bit younger than we remember. Last year with the A's was horrific. Hit .212. Did hit 14 home runs with a .698 OPS. The year before that, how about these numbers? These aren't bad with the A's. 243, 762 OPS, 20 home runs, and 60 RBIs. What I have decided to do, because when you go over guys that are not that important to you, so you're not like really breaking them down, you check out Baseball Savant and you say, okay, let me see if there's red or blue next to them in a lot of categories. The blue is bad, the red is good. But really, I go there for the defense because I don't know. I don't know what J.J. Bleday is defensively. His arm strength and arm value is ranked very high. His range is considered like the worst. So if your range sucks, I have no use for you, especially if you're battling to be a fourth or fifth outfielder. But let me give you a few more outfielders. Alexander Canario. That's right. I mean, who could forget Alexander Canario was the hot name. Remember, the Mets acquired him in spring training. We were trying to figure out why. We're like, does this guy have a chance to make the team? And there were some who wanted him over Starling Marte. It did not happen. He ended up in Pittsburgh and really did not perform. But they could bring him back if they wanted. His final numbers in Detroit were 218, 611 OPS, 6 home runs, 20 RBIs. So, but he could play all over the outfield. The guy who I think has jumped out at most is Adolis Garcia. And I have a level of interest in Adolis Garcia. He's going to be 33 years old, so he's not the youngest guy. But much like Marcus Semien, and of course a teammate of Marcus Semien, he's coming off of 2 really bad offensive seasons. Bad offensive seasons. He did hit 25 home runs in 2024, so at least you could take that with a 684 OPS. But last year, and he ended up missing about 30 games, his power dropped a little bit, 19 home runs, hit 227, 665 OPS. The appeal of Adolis Garcia is twofold, though. Number one, the guy won a Gold Glove 3 years ago. So I'm going to at least believe that defensively, he hasn't fallen off that much. So you're talking about a guy who defends at a pretty high level. And you're also talking about a guy who could be just a candidate for change of scenery, one more big-time year. Like, I think he certainly would be a candidate for that. What I was disappointed in is when I see these down numbers, one of the things I like to do is, all right, let me see the splits. Like, if he's mashing lefties, that could make sense. Maybe you could bring him in as a platoon player. But he's one of those guys that has always been really a reverse split player. He doesn't hit lefties more than righties when you look at his entire career and even when you look at last year. So there isn't much there with that. I think my appeal on Adolis Garcia would be I would not bring him in to be a starter. I wouldn't bring him in saying, okay, there's my everyday left fielder, even though he played right field. So I guess technically my everyday right fielder, moving Soto to left. It's more, hey, if I could get him in on a one-year deal with the intention of being you're a fourth outfielder who can defend, and if you hit, I'll find a way to play you more, then I'm not against it. But I think right now, when we look at the Met outfield situation, we need more certainty. And so signing Adolis Garcia to take one of those outfield spots would be a massive disappointment. That's why I frame it as I'd have more interest in him as a fourth outfielder. Because I know there's a lot of discourse about Adolis Garcia, and I'm not telling you I believe in him, but that's a flyer for a breakout year kind of guy. The other one is Christopher Morel. And Christopher Morel was an incredibly talented player who has a ton of power, but strikes out at an insanely high pace. Christopher Morel is young. He is still 26 years old and won't turn 27 until the middle of June. The negative is you're talking about a guy that really after that big year in 2023, when he hit 26 home runs, had an 800 OPS, and looked like a blossoming young player, he just hasn't really backed it up. He still hits for a lot of power, but his strikeout rates are just, they're unconscionable. Yeah, unconscionable. The MLB average for strikeout percentage is 22%, just to give you context. He strikes out 30%, and last year with Tampa, he struck out 35%. That is just atrocious.
Why do you think that they non-tendered him? I mean, last year he made $771,000. So, like, in the arbitration, what is he set to make?
I think he would probably make a couple of $1 million. He would be due for a raise, but I think it goes back to what I just said. He struck out 35% of the time.
Wow.
They probably don't think he's any good. And since he went to Tampa Bay, like his numbers in Tampa plummeted. 208 since joining the Rays with a 632 OPS. I think the problem is you look at a guy like Morel, and he does have great position versatility. Last year, he played a ton of left field. You got to go back a little bit earlier in his career. Really in Chicago, they just didn't do it as much in Tampa. He played a bunch of games at third base. So he's played third base, played a little bit of shortstop, has played the outfield, mostly left field. Early in his career, has played center field. So you definitely like the position versatility and the power and the age. Those are the things that certainly jump out at you. You're 26 years old. There's still that possibility. I just think he's just been bad the last couple of years. So I would view him kind of similarly to Adolis Garcia. I'm not against signing a guy like that. I just wouldn't view him as an everyday player. I would view him as that could be a super utility player. Colin Holderman is another guy that jumps out at me. And of course, he jumps out at me and all of us because we traded him for Daniel Vogelbach. And we're still pissed off about that. So here's what's weird about Holderman, and it's so typical of relievers. He was having a good year with the Mets in 2022, which is why most of us didn't love the fact that they traded him for Vogelbach. He goes to Pittsburgh, doesn't pitch a lot, whatever, kind of throw it away. In 2023, he goes out, makes 58 appearances, and is a really solid reliever. 2024, same thing, makes 55 appearances, really solid reliever. Last year, he was just a disaster. He couldn't throw strikes. His strikeout numbers were way down. He pitched to a 7 ERA. So I think just bringing him back to the Met organization is interesting, but not sure what you're going to get. And the other guy who I'm very interested in fact, if I had to rank all of the non-tendered free agents and tell you whom I'm most intrigued by, it's actually Jason Foley. Jason Foley ended up being the Detroit Tigers closer in 2024. He pitched really, really well for the Tigers. And then last year, he actually didn't make the team, which I remember reading about and was like, that's weird. How does this guy not make the team? Like, look at his first 3 years in the major leagues. He's a really good relief pitcher. Didn't make the team and then got hurt and needed Tommy John surgery. And so never actually pitched at the major league level last year. As crazy as that is, he did pitch very briefly in AAA and through 6 2/3 scoreless innings. Like, he was great, but it was brief. So there's a mystery in terms of, like, when will he be ready? Like, physically, is he good to go for the start of 2026? But here's what I know about Jason Foley. He was a damn good reliever for the first 3 years of his career. You bring him in, I can't imagine he's going to make a lot of money. And I think the Mets have a little bit of a kind of a what's it called when you say you have an advantage? Yeah, they have an advantage. Sorry. We record some of these Ricos late at night, and I'm not great with remembering words at 2 PM. So, sometimes it gets crazy. They have a little bit of an advantage in signing Jason Foley because he was actually born in Manhasset, and he went to Wellington Mepham High School, Mepham High School in North Belmore, New York. So he's a local guy. I'm not telling you he's a Met fan. I have no idea, but he's a local guy. So when you mix in local guy, big, strong kid, was pitching well for a couple of years, got hurt last year, that's my top one. Of all the other guys, Christopher Morel and Adolis Garcia and J.J. Bleday and anyone else you want to come up with, I'm most intrigued by Jason Foley. That's a buy low. Who knows? Maybe he rekindles what he was doing with Detroit in 24 and 25. There's a lot of other relievers. The Yankees DFA'd, not DFA'd, but non-tendered a bunch of them. Mark Leiter, veterans, Scott Efros, Ian Hamilton, Jake Cousins. I saw Mike Tauchman was DFA'd by Chicago. I'm surprised his defensive metrics are terrible. So I was like, oh, I thought he was good defensively. I forgot about that.
What about
and a lot of other relievers, but those are the guys that jump out at me.
What about Nathaniel Lowe as a replacement to Pete Alonso at first base?
No. I saw Nathaniel Lowe is out there, and it doesn't. Nathaniel Lowe looks like a guy you would play in beer league softball.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not saying that's a negative. I'm just, telling you. The Mets ended up non-tendering 3 guys: Max Kranick, Danny Young, and Jose Castillo. But I'm sure Jose Castillo will be back at some point. Like, he won't be gone forever. Let me read some of your emails, the ricob@gmail.com. Here's my goal for the Rico Brogna over the next bunch of Ricos. We've obviously received a ton of emails, a lot of it about Brandon Nimmo, the Marcus Semien trade, and obviously a variety of subjects. I'm going to try to mix in a bunch of them throughout our podcast, and we'll also have some mailbags. So my goal is to basically read every email we've gotten. May take a while, but I'm going to do my best. Let me start it off with Ryan. Ryan writes, pure and simple, I'm a longtime listener and fan, and I'm asking you to make me feel better, to change my mind about giving up my ticket plan. Just hearing Stern's voice as he smirks pisses me off beyond belief. Seeing Nimmo, of whom was still a very good player, get traded has saddened and angered a lot of us. No disrespect to Marcus Semien. As if the boy genius is dying to let Alonso walk, and playing games with Diaz didn't make us uneasy enough. I don't blindly trust Mr. Masterclass. Cohen stepped in to retain Pete and made Soto happen, not Stearns. If boy genius got his way, the 2025 Mets would have finished in 4th place. He got lucky in 24. He has been a failure. His I know better than everyone ways would have been perfect under the Wilpons. He's a younger Sandy Alderson, and as expensive one at that. He got paid $10 million to scrounge up 46 pitchers, 45 of which couldn't escape the 5th inning. If Alonso and Diaz walk for reasonable contracts elsewhere, I think I'll be walking too, and I can't believe I'm saying that. I'm an emotional fan, but Alonso's production cannot be denied, and the trumpets signal the best reliever in the MLB is coming into the game. I need your help, Evan, or maybe you don't blame me thinking about not going to games or tuning in. I've been a fan since Bernard Gilkey was our cleanup hitter, and I've never felt like this. Ryan, I respect all your emotion. I think you're being very hyperbolic. I think you're going way overboard. This offseason may not go the way I want. It may not go the way you want. And I will voice my displeasures with moves that are made. But the Mets are going to go into 2026 with a shot to win their division, with a shot to make the playoffs, with a shot to go on a run. They're not going to go in as the favorite. The Dodgers are already the favorites. There's literally nothing the Mets could do that would make them the favorites. They could get Skubal, Alonso, Diaz, Schwarber, stack it all, and they won't be the favorites. So I understand the anger. I understand the voicing of the opinions, but I would talk you out of not tuning in and giving up my tickets. Look, if you don't want to pay for the tickets, I don't blame you for that. They're expensive. But I wouldn't do it based on the offseason. And the other thing is we got to try to be fair. We have to try to be fair. We all have our opinions, and sometimes opinions lead to preconceived notions. You can be mad at David Stearns. You don't have to like David Stearns. But I also don't think it's fair to take any move that you like and say that's not him. When it came to re-signing Pete Alonso last year, they ended up signing him to a one-year deal. Don't you think that's what David Stearns wanted the entire time? Like, I think it's clear, and this is the argument I've had with Hoff, and I guess I'll have it with Ryan as well, our emailer. I think he wants Pete Alonso on his terms. That is not the same as I don't want Pete Alonso. Like, F him, I want him off the team. No, I think he wants him on a shorter-term deal. We have every right to disagree with that and explain why he's wrong. But I think to just blindly say he doesn't want him isn't fair. He wants him on a short-term deal. Last year, there was no market for him, so we got him back on a short-term deal. If the market does the same right now, then he'll be back. Because I think the Mets have no issue giving him a short-term deal. Jeremy writes, hey, Evan, I was looking at Fangraph's projections for 2026, and this caught my eye. Based on the players currently under contract for every team, i.e. not including current free agents like Pete Alonso and Edwin Diaz, the Mets are projected for the third most position player WAR of any team in Major League Baseball, trailing only the Yankees and the Dodgers. By contrast, we're only projected for the 16th most pitcher WAR of any team in Major League Baseball, and three of those teams above us are NL East teams. Obviously, projections are just projections, and that could easily be off. But is it possible that the Mets' internal analysis aligns with this, that they don't need to do much in terms of adding position players and will have a pitcher-focused offseason? Curious what you think, Jeremy. First of all, I am in an internal fight with WAR. I think it's a useful stat. I think it's worth mentioning. I do not believe it's the end-all, be-all. I think that sometimes WAR puts too much value on defense and too much value on base running. And that's not to say that I don't value defense and base running. I just think that it feels, and I say feels because there are players I watch, and I say that number doesn't match what I'm seeing. I've thought that a lot about Alonso over the years. I think the WAR has been unfair to him. So the first response is I don't think WAR is a perfect number. Number two, I almost think that a projected WAR is going to favor teams that have superstar players because their WARs are so high and not as volatile as the younger player you don't know what you're getting a lot from. So I think in the Dodgers and the Yankees case, it's obvious they have a lot of stars under contract. In the Dodgers case, Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman and obviously Shohei Ohtani. And I think in the Mets case, they're certainly helped out by having Francisco Lindor and Juan Soto. Steven writes, how would I define Brandon Nimmo's legacy as a Met? A long-shot major leaguer whose determination and attitude helped bump his ceiling from maybe a fourth outfielder with some luck to an everyday regular with an elite batting eye. He battled frequent injuries in the early and middle parts of his tenure, but he was able to overcome those issues as well with similar hard work and determination. However, whether on his own volition or as a result of the front office decision, he ultimately and gradually evolved from one of the league's best on-base hitters to a typical run-of-the-mill, high strikeout, lowish on-base player who chases power. The 2022 and prior version of Nimmo would see 8 to 9 pitches per at-bat and would reach base at a 40% clip, was probably worth the contract extension Billy Epler gave him. However, the 325 on base, 25 home run player with a climbing strikeout rate was simply never going to be worth another 5 years, especially entering his mid-30s. So while Nimmo's character and ability to turn himself into a major league regular are admirable and will always hold a special place in the minds of Met fans, the player he ultimately became was not worth the price tag in the end. We'll probably never know who caused Nimmo to chase, lift, and launch angle, but I can't help but shake the feeling that he would have been a better career Met had he just continued to be himself. Imagine a 400 on-base percentage, Nimmo and Soto at the top of the batting order. That would have been something special. I don't know why that changed as much as it did. It's really tough to put my finger on it. The last 2 seasons with the Mets, his on-base dropped at a very high clip. I mean, in 2023, he got on base 363. The year before, 367. The year before that, 401. The year before that, 404. In fact, going back to 2020, his on-base percentage has gone down every single season for 6 consecutive years. 401, 367, 363, 327, 324. It doesn't perfectly coexist with the walk percentage, but it's not that far off. And again, I like to give you perspective. The average walk percentage in baseball is 8.4%. In 2021, he was at 14%. And then it dropped to 10%, 11%, 11%. And in this past year, 7.7%. That's less than the league average. How does a player go from walking at such a high clip to walking at such a low clip, a below average clip? I mean, if I went into a time machine and said to 2023 Evan, hey, Brandon Nimmo is going to walk at a less percentage clip in 2025 than the average major leaguer, I would have said, you're nuts. So I don't know what led to all that, but it is a great point. We've talked about it before. Brandon Nimmo evolved as a player, and when it comes to walking, it wasn't a good evolution.
The one thing that I would look at is as he got less and less healthy with the plantar fasciitis, the knee, even this year, the way he started out in 2025, like he didn't really perform well.
Why would that affect his walking, though?
Because his approach at the plate, because he's not one who is going to sit there and run out balls and run out the way he normally does. He's going to need to get balls in the air and over the out of the park. I think that's really what it was. I think I think he just could not be, and you saw that in the outfield too. He is not a healthy ball player. He's got his neck issues. I mean, and this is not trying to be critical of the guy. This is just reality. His body is not one.
No, I agree with you, and I think that's why most of us viewed him as a guy that should DH this year if he was still on the team. I just don't know how that connects to clearly what's an approach change. And I don't know if it was where he was hitting in the batting order. Maybe I don't know if it lines up perfectly with that, but it does feel connected. Like when he was leading off, maybe it was dude, I'm just going to grind it approach. And then when he left the leadoff spot for Francisco Lindor, it was an approach change. So I'm not questioning the injuries. It's odd. And it did really affect his Met career. The one other disagreement I would have with Steven, who sent that email about Nimmo, is I don't like calling him a long shot major leaguer. He was a first round pick. He was selected right in front of Jose Fernandez, the late Jose Fernandez. So I get he feels like an underdog story, maybe because his high school didn't have a baseball team in Cheyenne, Wyoming. But when you are a first round pick taken 13th overall, at that point, you are not a long shot. You're supposed to not just be a major leaguer. You're supposed to be really good. And look, ultimately he was. I mean, he had a 10-year career with the Mets. It's very difficult to say a guy taken in the first round. I know the expectations are high, but you have a 10-year career with a team? That's pretty good. And we are putting together our Brandon Nimmo tribute Rico, which will happen sometime in the next month. So keep forward to that. And one last thing, speaking of future Ricos, this is from Eli. Eli writes, "Hey guys, love the show. Do you think you guys can do an episode examining every single David Stearns trade he has made since joining the Mets? It appears to me that he lost every single trade other than Luis Torrens for cash. I would love an in-depth look." Well, what I love about this email, Eli, is that you're just talking about trades. Because if we were examining every free agent signing, every minor league signing, I feel like my head would explode. But when it comes to simple trades, you got it. So I can't give you a date, Eli. We'll do some research. But coming up in the next few weeks, you got it. A David Stearns trade deep dive since he's joined the Mets. We're not going to include Brewer trades.
So you're saying you don't want to do the DFA waiver wire claims from this past year?
No, my head can't do it. I apologize, but we'll do a David Stearns trade deep dive. Coming up next week, the week after Thanksgiving, it's trade week here on the Rico. And so around any breaking news, because whenever there is breaking news, we give you Ricos, we analyze it. We will take a look at the starting pitching trade market and the position player trade market. That is coming up in just a few days here on the Rico. You can email the pod to ricob@gmail.com, ricob@gmail.com. We're also continuing to take your suggestions on the Rico Rewatchable. There will be 2 rewatchables this season, one of which in a tribute to the 25-year anniversary of the game coming up in September of 2026. The Mike Piazza home run game, the return from 9/11 Mets-Braves game. That'll be one of the Rico rewatchables. And we got a lot of suggestions on the other. Some good, some bad, some wins, some losses. We will try to narrow that down to a couple of choices for you by next week. But continue to send in your nominees at thericob@gmail.com. We appreciate you listening, downloading, and subscribing to another edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.